Hello and welcome everyone to today's webcast, Having Critical Conversations in a Virtual Setting. My name is Tanya Trivoni. I'm a senior practice leader here at Canadian Management Center. We have a great conversation lined up for you today. And one of the reasons it's going to be so great is because I am joined by Lisa Mitchell. Lisa is a facilitator with CMC, but she's also the president of Green Apple Consulting. She brings over 25 years of experience to this conversation. She's worked across various industries. She's worked as a corporate leader, former vice president, as well as an executive coach. And I can tell you from experience, having worked with Lisa, that she is absolutely committed to helping people bring out their full potential. And she's got a lot of insights as it relates to this topic around critical conversations. So I'm super excited. Thank you, Lisa, for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
So before I hand things over to Lisa, just a couple of quick announcements. The first one is, for any of you who are new to CMC, a warm welcome. We are a national organization dedicated to preparing the next generation of leaders to thrive in tomorrow's marketplace. And we hold webcasts like these ones to help folks in our CMC community, and we love to hear from you in terms of what topics you'd like us to be talking about. So please stick around to the end. We have a feedback survey with a comment box. Would love to hear what's on your mind, what you would like to see in terms of future sessions. In terms of communicating with us, we're going to encourage you to interact. We want this to be a dialogue. You're going to see the option of a chat panel and a Q&A panel. We encourage you to put your comments in the chat panel. They're only visible to Lisa and I, but for those burning questions that you'd like us to answer, try to put those in the Q&A panel. That just helps us see them more easily. So questions in the Q&A, any comments in the chat panel. Finally, this session is being recorded and you will receive a copy of that recording in a couple days. Now, with all that said, I'm going to hand the floor over to Lisa. Lisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So let's kick off with a question. So the first question that I have is, what is the #1 source of workplace conflict? So think about that for a second, see what floats into your mind. So there was an 18-month-long study that was done, and in it, they asked people this question. And I'm just curious what you thought people said. So I see somebody's mentioned difference of opinion. What are some other ideas that you might have? Lack of transparency, poor management, okay. Lack of communication, politics, personality conflicts, lots of themes and different responses coming in. So it's interesting because 100% of respondents, here it is, I need a drum roll, reported that it was other people. 100% other people were the source of conflict, which makes me howl because I do remember back in the day and having a leader who was particularly frustrated, and I was working as an HR business partner, and he came in and we were talking about some issues with somebody on his team, and he said, you know, I mean, I love leading people and everything. It's just the people part, right? He literally said that and then laughed at himself as it came out. So, you know, we do tend to attribute personal conflict to judgment that we have about others or politics or agendas and so on.
In it's never us, right?
Oh no, it's never us, right?
Just to be clear.
Yeah, okay. We're never at the as a part of the problem, right? So, but what's interesting is that the study dug in and found that in actual fact, it wasn't just this judgment and other people that leads to the conflict. It's actually a lack of clarity. All right. So it's around when there's assumptions made, we tell ourselves stories, there's misunderstandings, there's a lack of communication, right? In the absence of information, we go negative. So the less you have clarity, the more you have conflict. So what we also found, and why we're talking here today, is that clarity can actually become further decreased when working virtually, which is, I think, why you're all here. We had a lot of positive response to this webinar. A lot of people signed up. So let's actually check in with everyone and ask you to do a poll. I'm going to hand it over to Tanya just to get a pulse check.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, we'd love to understand. I'm going to just launch a poll now. You should see this on your screen. And we want to know what percentage of your workforce is currently virtual? So hopefully you're seeing the poll questions. A couple people are responding in the chat. If you could respond into the actual poll and click submit, that would be.
I don't see the poll, Tanya. Let's just try.
It's weird. I mean, people are saying it's not available. Let me just relaunch.
Oh, there we go. I just saw it.
There we go. So hopefully people are seeing that now. Sorry. That's the fun of virtual. Okay, so I can see that there's a lot of activity coming in now. I'll give it a few more seconds. Thanks for your patience. And results are slowing down. So I'm going to end the poll here and share our results in a moment. So you should see, ta-da. So it looks like the vast majority of us are currently working virtual. And what I'd like to know also, just, by way of contrast, the next question would be, how many of you were virtual before? So we have got the majority of folks now virtual, but what was it like pre-COVID? So I'm going to just, with any luck here, launch that poll. So let us know so we can get a sense. Oh yeah, I can see some of the results are coming in much lower.
There's been a shift, I think.
Yeah. So let's see, a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and let's take a look here. Okay, huge difference. Wow. So before I would say was almost 90% in terms of you're currently working virtual, but before COVID, as you can see, 86% are saying less than 25%. So Lisa, we've got a lot of folks who've undergone a really huge shift in the way that they've been working. So I'm going to just close the poll and let you continue in terms of sharing what we're going to talk about as it relates to how to manage in this kind of new environment.
Well, it's wild, really, right? Like, what an incredible shift, right, in such a short period of time. And we've all been, there's lots of people, frontlines, essential workers still that are not virtual and can't be. So really hats off to those folks. And then there are so many of us that are feeling a bit confined and isolated and behind a screen all day, right? There's a real thing called Zoom fatigue. So you're in the right place. That's the good news. So let's talk about what we're going to really try to dig into in this session. So today you'll learn to, let's pull up the objectives here. Recognize the factors that can make these virtual conversations trickier than face-to-face, especially today. And we're going to look at ways to address the practical and the psychological barriers that are inherent in virtual communication. There's actual barriers, so we'll break those down for you. And then we're going to help you see 5 critical steps that you can take to enhance your skill and the ease with which you have these critical conversations in a virtual environment. So Tanya, were you going to say something there?
No, I was going to say, I think, critical conversations were difficult even before this environment. So it just makes it that much more stressful, I think. So I think it's great that we're able to have this conversation. You're able to share some of the insights that you're about to share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go to the next slide and break down what is a critical conversation anyways. So, this is really where you can have a regular conversation, an update meeting, regular weekly team meeting, and everything's, motoring along quite well. And then you have the critical conversation. That's where there's higher stakes. There's something that needs to be discussed that could evoke emotions in either you or the other party. So there's this heightened sense of emotion. You've got higher stakes and often differing perspectives, different point of views. And so what happens there is that, neither party really has the whole story, right? And it becomes more critical because it can more easily escalate out of control. So please type in the chat if you have a critical conversation in mind that you need to have. Just put a yes if that. So not yet. So some people are here just to be proactive and prepared, but there's a lot of yeses coming in. All right.
There's a ton.
There's a ton. Yeah, we can all relate to this. Performance reviews. Yeah, I see that one coming through. I've been working with a couple of organizations around those. 'Tis the season for a lot of organizations. All right. Well, let's go to the next slide, Tanya, and look at a scenario that I think, even if it's not directly related to your organization, you can relate to it. So This scenario, if we just pull it up on screen, is around, Raina. So let's assume you have a colleague named Raina. She started with your organization 4 months ago, rather, and she's been late sending you her web traffic report. So again, put reality aside. Let's just pretend you really need this web traffic report, even if you don't know what it is. And you can't complete your own work, your own report. So perhaps it's a roll-up that you need to then forward to your boss. And it's interesting because there was a Zoom meeting with your team last week. She didn't mention anything about having an issue with getting it to you on time. And you had reminded her that you needed it by Wednesday. You know that in this team meeting, she was on the call. You think she was anyways, because her name showed on the screen, but you couldn't see her. She had her camera off, which is tough, right? I see that a lot, people keeping their cameras off. It's really tough to connect, right? With another person if you can't see them. It's just a black screen. So it's now Friday at 11 a.m. Okay, you emailed her yesterday saying, hey, looking for that report that was actually needed yesterday, and can you tell me what's going on? So, what do you think might be going on here? What might be the challenges related to a scenario like this specifically? Please, I invite you to put in the chat, what are some of the things that may be making it difficult in this scenario or in general to have a critical conversation virtually? Okay, assumptions. I'm not sure what PTO means. I'm sorry. I'm pulling a blank on that one. Children at home. Oh my. Understanding urgency. You know what? Somebody just put that through. Personal time off. Okay. Family issues. Still learning. She's new. Mental stress. Okay. So what I see, I would just like to acknowledge people, because what I see is a group of people on the line here that are really trying to think about what's the situation from Raina's perspective, right? So
there's a lot of compassion going on, because some of the things I anticipated was like, she's irresponsible, she's not reliable, and people, like to your point, are really, a lot of them anyway, are talking about maybe she's got a lot of going on, she's stressed. So kudos to everyone on the line.
I think part of this is mindset, and I'd like to ask people to recall the mindset you're in right now. Right now, you're in a mindset to be curious, to learn, right? You're investing time out of your busy day to be with us today, to really think about this topic. And yet, if you were on the other side in this scenario or something similar, I think we can agree that there might be at least a momentary irritation, right? Because you don't have what you need, and you may see this person as the obstacle, or their behavior as the obstacle in terms of you being able to get what you need done. So let's just hold the scenario of Raina aside for now. We'll keep referring back to her, but I think it's interesting that there's a variety of different barriers that can come into play. So let's keep going, Tanya. So there's a number of barriers. We're going to break them down. There's 3 main ones, okay? And some of you have already listed them in the chat, and there's so many chats coming in, it's hard for me to see them all. So I'm just trying to get the gist, so you know. So the first one, number 1, is the role of nonverbal communication, right? So there are a variety of studies that have been done over the years, and they show that roughly 60 to 80% of communication is actually nonverbal. So it's crazy, right? So beyond the words we speak, right? There's tone overlaid with that. There's all of this other information that we communicate through gestures with our hands and through our body language, our posture, and so forth. So we're missing that a lot of the time. Especially if you're in a team meeting where you have the Brady Bunch thing going on, right? You can have up to 30 people on a Zoom screen. So you're literally, people are reduced to these tiny little boxes, just their faces, right? Hard to pick up on those other cues. You just can't see them. And the troubling thing is that researchers have shown that we're actually better at identifying people's tone of voice and therefore their intention behind their words when we can see their body language with their gestures. It's actually helpful for us because, to give you an example, like I might say, Tanya, you're leading the meeting very effectively today. but then I've crossed my fingers behind my back. So, you know, I'm saying it with a smile, don't really mean it. So, you know, or it could be the opposite. So, you know, there was also a study of TED speakers, which I think is interesting. So if you've ever watched a TED speech or TEDx and so on, really, really fascinating. And the training people go through to get ready to go out on stage and speak their truth. And they're working from memory, right? They're really focused on where they use gestures and so on. And it was interesting because they showed that the speakers that had really worked on having appropriate gestures at the right time were found more interesting by the audience. They were rated more highly. So, you know, in the day of Zoom and WebEx and Microsoft Teams and so on, it's easy for us to kind of hide behind our camera, right? And not show as much what's going on, not because we're trying to hide, but it's, I don't know, put in the chat if yes, you've ever deliberately turned your camera off during a meeting, even if people asked you to have the camera on, just because you sort of didn't feel great. Maybe you were still in your pajamas, you know.
Yes, 100%. I'm not responding because the session is being recorded and it might be held against me, but feel free to, we say the odd no, but yeah, they're like, me.
Well, I was in a 2-day retreat with a mastermind last week, and a friend in there, she was feeling really hijacked by something that was said by somebody, and she actually put her camera off and then sent me a separate text saying, I'm sorry, I had to put my camera off because I was having trouble not showing what was going on emotionally for me. Right? So it's okay. It does happen. I think when we get into the 5 steps to help you manage and navigate these critical conversations, there'll be a helpful tip in there for you. So let's move forward and keep digging into these barriers. So proximity bias. This one is so interesting. So it's this concept of out of sight, out of mind. So we actually prefer working with people that are in proximity to us, right? It's actually easier for us to kind of remember, you know, I miss myself, you know, I work from home a lot of the time as an entrepreneur, and I work on client sites too in the old days. And I really miss being able to bump into my colleagues, you know, going to get a coffee or in the hallway, and you have those informal conversations. And I know so many of us are starting to miss that, even if it's kind of nice not to have the commute. That kind of benefit may have worn off a little bit in appeal.
Or to stay home in our pajamas. I did notice some comments here when you talk about turning the video off. They're like, yeah, I'm in pajamas all day unless I have to present. So that is one bonus. But.
Yeah, or you've got the yoga pants on, and then so you know then you've got the business top going, right? Research has actually showed that there's been in terms of retail sales way more interest in tops, right? Pants are not doing so well. No, it's true. Like this is
totally makes sense.
Right? And shoes.
I feel like I need to stand up just to prove that I'm not in pajamas. But anyway, no, continue.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that. But anyway, so having less influence with others is a real thing, right? When we're not in proximity to them, it's harder to have those connections and build that trust in that relationship. So you know, if you think about the scenario with Raina, what's happening is we don't actually know what's going on with her because we have no visual cues whatsoever, no communication coming in, right? Maybe, as some people said in the chat, maybe she's got some personal issues, or she just didn't get the urgency of the request, right? Fair enough. So we don't have that clarity. So, you know, like other cognitive biases, there's also the concept of distance bias that you may have heard of. And this is where often if there's a distance bias, it means that we feel more empowered to make decisions more quickly, more easily, but it also means we may miss out on consulting important stakeholders, right? So it's at the expense of getting the full picture. So when we're physically distanced from one another, we actually have to be that much more intentional and prepared in terms of how we get ready for everyday conversations as well as critical conversations. So that brings us to our next poll question. Let's hope this one works.
Yeah, let's see if we can get this one right. So would love to understand, I'm going to launch it here in a moment, whether or not you actually feel more connected to your team because of or since COVID from before. So I feel more connected to my colleagues now than before COVID. So I can see that the poll is visible because I can see the votes coming in, and they're coming in fast and furious. And thank you for all the comments that you're sending in the chat panel. We are seeing them, and there are so many that I'd love to respond to. but we would run out of time, but this is really great. All right, the votes are slowing down, so I'm going to end the poll now, and I am going to share the results. And it looks like the majority of folks are not feeling more connected. So about 48% said no, 28% said yes, and then there was a group of about 26% that were neutral on the topic. And I find this really interesting because I know for myself, that I would say I was working virtually before COVID, but since COVID hit and all the things that we've been doing at CMC virtually to keep people connected, the informal gatherings, etc., I would say that I've gotten to know my colleagues a lot more, and I feel actually more connected than pre-COVID. And so this piece around social connection is really important. And I know, Lisa, you're about to explain exactly why it's important that we're doing things to feel connected before we're in a position to have a critical conversation.
Yes, exactly. So, you know, this idea of connection, there's such a mix in the chat I was looking, and there's so many people like Claudians that have started in their role during COVID. So they've never actually met anybody in person at their new role. And I've heard this from several of my clients. It's really, really interesting because to be able to actually connect and build trust and build a relationship, right, for onboarding is critical, right? That's really, really something that's usually built into any kind of onboarding program or plan. So, you know, we need social connection because ultimately it is the foundation for trust. And trust is foundational to those relationships that help us get stuff done together in a collaborative way with less conflict. So if you think about the role of listening, of positive assumptions versus Raina just has no work ethic, right? We're assuming the best, right? Something's come up for her. It allows us to listen with curiosity. We're going to touch on listening much more. And all of this, when we lean in, literally and aim for connection, we are able to have better conversations. So I noticed some people said that, you know, more connection has happened, that they have more touch points, which is interesting because I've heard that too from many leaders where they recognized, you know what, I don't think I actually was meeting enough or checking in with my team enough before. So it's almost like it took a global pandemic for them to sort of wake up and sort of go, I want to be more regular and frequent in terms of how often I chat with people. Other leaders have said, you know, I have one coaching client. Oh, she really struggled in the beginning of COVID. And I remember her saying, like, initially she was doing a lot of touch points. There was some informal, like, you know, cocktail hour on Thursday kind of thing. And people were doing things like that, or like a potluck where they all shared what they were eating and, you know, talked about it, created a theme party. But then it kind of dropped off because the busyness kind of came back and it became difficult to maintain. Tanya, you're nodding. You're hearing this too?
Yeah, no, I've definitely been hearing that. And even within our own organization, we started very frequently with these meetings. And then it kind of, you know, I think you have to find the balance between making those connections and then also to your point, the Zoom fatigue. So then it became a little bit more informal, less frequent, but now we're starting to amp them up again because I think we're seeing the value in the connection, in bringing humor, in the impact that, you know, the isolation has been having on people's engagement and motivation. So we've been doing a lot of I'd love to do a session just on sharing some of the creative ideas that I've seen other organizations and the ones that we've been doing. It's been a lot of fun, but it is a balance and you have to figure out what works, you know, for your team, obviously.
Yeah. Well, Katie's mentioned, you know, I have so much screen fatigue. So even to be able to connect with family and friends online is difficult. I relate, Katie, I really do. Because initially we do these Saturday night Zoom game nights with a group of friends, with the kids and everything. And then they kind of, after a few weeks, we were kind of done, right, for a while. So we're recognizing that we need to still connect in different ways. So it does require some creativity. And again, that intentionality piece keeps coming in. So, you know, I have noticed that some organizations too are getting stronger in terms of creating different kind of online forums and opportunities for people to connect informally, right? Not always on video, but in different asynchronous ways. So
That's a really good point. Not always on video. That's one of the biggest shifts. So like I was saying, I worked virtually before, but not every conversation was a video conversation. And that takes a lot more out of you. So they've studied this. It's not normal to have all eyes staring at you and even to see yourself. So you're monitoring other people, but then you're also noticing yourself. And then there's another level of distraction. So it's completely different than the in-person piece, and it can really.
I've stopped having myself on the screen, you know, when I'm it's just too distracting. We're not meant to sort of see ourselves. And I notice some people, they'll be kind of checking themselves out right as they're talking to me. It is a bit distracting. So yeah, I think we're all still figuring out our way with technology, which brings me to the next barrier. The challenge of technology and the benefit. It's kind of crazy that, you know, when I think about, you know, 15 years ago, for instance, we weren't doing video conference, and now it's kind of ubiquitous in all sorts of organizations. What if we had landed in this pandemic at a time when, you know, before the cell phone, before the video call kind of thing, it would have been that much more difficult. So it's a gift and it's a curse at the same time, because if you think about glitchy polls, right, not working, and you've got, you know, 615 people looking at you waiting for the poll and it's not coming up, or glitchy audio, right, where it's in and out, it's not working. My husband spent an entire day, thank God I have a handyman husband, wiring the house so that myself and he and our son, who's on online school, could be hardwired, right, Ethernet wise, so that we weren't relying on spotty Wi-Fi. Changes the game. But, you know, that's a lot of additional effort. Trying to see somebody in a dark room where they're backlit, you know, so you can't really see their face. You're having a hard enough time with picking up on body cues, but they're in the dark. So they might be still on camera, but you can't really see them. Another one is lack of eye contact. So they're watching themselves, or they're just looking down and they're working almost while they're on video. That's tricky, but also the too much eye contact, as Tanya mentioned, it can be a bit disconcerting, right? When you're just in a meeting, picture yourself back in a meeting room, right? You can be looking down, making your notes, people are looking at the speaker around the room, you know, somebody's coming in. It's very different. You can glance out the window and nobody is beating you up for it, right? They're not thinking it's weird.
Yeah.
You know, somebody's asking here, how do you encourage someone to turn on their camera when they normally don't? Thanks, Mary. I usually state at the beginning, I do a lot of virtual training, you know, and I'll say, you know, I pick up on your energy when I can see you. And I think it's likewise. It will help you be focused and really get as much return on your investment of time and energy if we're all in this together. So I can't make you turn on your camera. I can ask you nicely and encourage you to do so. And I think you'll get more out of it as well. And then, you know what, after that, if they refuse and it's really becoming a big deal for the team, for instance, I might have a one-on-one conversation, or I choose to let it go. Like at some point, you got to decide, how big an issue is this really?
And sometimes people don't realize that they can use virtual backgrounds. Some of what their concern is because, you know, they've got kids or whatever in the background, or they may not have the ideal setup from home. So that can sometimes help as well. But I agree, you have to figure out what's sort of the root cause of it. But yes, and people are mentioning that it just adds a level of stress. So when we're talking about crucial conversations or critical conversations, that's the last thing you need, is to have to deal with, you know, additional stress from tech issues.
Yeah.
So.
And you know what, I've had literally two people in the last week say one was a network call, one was actually a client who actually said to me, can we just go by telephone, do old-fashioned telephone call?
Yes, I love that occasionally, you know,
now. And I'm just so done with being on camera. And I said, yes. And I actually enjoyed it too. Right. Yeah. Now, people can be just as distracted when they're talking on the phone as they are on video. And yet it was an interesting shift for me, because I found I was kind of in flow. It was almost nice. I didn't have the distraction of multiple boxes on the screen and so on. So just something to consider.
Yeah. All right. And a final comment there, because you're right, we do need to move on. One person said, you know, they welcome children and pets. And I think in terms of the regular everyday conversations, that's great if you make that, you know, okay, in terms of the cultural norm. But I think in the moment of a critical conversation, you certainly want to make sure there are no distractions to the best of your ability. But yeah, let's take a
Yeah.
look at.
And it's easier for some than others, right? You know, some people are in small quarters. I have the benefit of having an enclosed office, and I consider myself very, very fortunate. And my renos were done in January last year before this happened. But a lot of people, they're trying to just steal a piece of space in an open living room where 3 other people are working, school or whatever. So we do have to be considerate of that and ask people to plan intentionally. Tanya, I think we need to have a conversation. It's really important that we both minimize distractions. What would be the best time, the best way to do that?
Yeah, I see some folks saying that they have employees that work in areas where they don't have strong internet connection. So right out of the gate, that might be the option to go with a old school phone call. So at least you can ensure that the audio is clear versus trying to deal with technology on top of whatever else you need to talk about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So we've talked about these barriers. So at this point, let's talk about 5 steps you can take to help your critical conversations be more successful, right? And to ensure that you're not escalating conflict without meaning to. So the first step, we talked about that lack of clarity being one of the roots of conflict. So the key thing is to clarify your intent for yourself, but also for the other person, and to communicate that intention. So this is something I'm fascinated about, this whole area of intentionality. It makes everything better when you do even a few seconds prep before a conversation, before a meeting, before anything that's important, that is important to you. Being prepared and taking a moment to reflect is always going to yield results.
And I love to talk about, that was the aha when we were preparing for this. I sometimes think about what I want. So what's my intention for me? So I need to get that report from Raina, but not always thinking about what's my intention for the other person. So I appreciated that you added that, it's a two-way street thing.
Well, yeah, because when you actually think about it and you say, okay, so I know I need to just get the darn report stuff from her, right? So I can do my work. If you think about how do you want this person, Raina, to experience you, I doubt you're going to say, I want her to think I'm mean.
Not usually, no.
Right? I don't think so. Most of us are not going to think that, right? The other thing is, what do I want for her? What's my intention for her? I want her to feel respected. I want her to feel heard. I want her to feel motivated and with me, that she's going to want to help me. And ultimately, I want to get the report. Right? But if we start with what we want somebody to feel, think, and believe, then we're usually going to enter that conversation more thoughtfully with high intentions, and we're going to, our impact will be aligned with our intention.
Absolutely.
Really, really. What's that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're actually getting to, where we are already on the next slide. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, so, and also, oh, interesting. Somebody says, I was in a meeting yesterday, organizer was late, didn't do an intro, so others just started jumping in and it wasted 20 minutes. As if we don't have enough meetings. Right? So intentionality, really, planning a meeting or planning a critical conversation, it's huge, right? Being really clear, what's the outcome we want to have? So anybody, when you think about this, if you had said yes earlier to the fact that there's a critical conversation you need to have, I invite you right now just to jot down, just for a moment, on the side of your desk here, what is your intention for that conversation, for you and for the other person? So just leave that as an aside, because that can be an important takeaway for you, okay? All right, so let's go back to Raina and consider this. So if we think about intentions and outcomes that we would like to have when we have this conversation, is first off, we want to know what got in the way, right? Not why didn't you give it to me, but what got in your way, in terms of getting it to me on time. And just open, no assumptions built in, not leading. And you might hear from her, I didn't know that I really didn't understand that it was that urgent. I'm sorry. I thought I had more flexibility and I had other things that took precedence. So sorry, go ahead, Tanya, the next bullet. So another outcome is I want to preserve or improve the relationship. I don't want to make it worse. And it seems like, oh, duh, of course you don't want to make it worse. But actually, if we just plow in, right, especially if emotions are a bit high and we're irritated with this person, we can actually damage the relationship further. You can be clear and kind at the same time. Okay, let's go to the next one. We want to maintain that person's self-esteem. So we don't want to make them feel that we think they're dumb or maliciously out to get us, right? We want to make sure they know we still have respect, and we're talking about behavior and impact, not about them personally. Another outcome is finally, I need the report, please, please, and thank you, right? So I'm seeing some chats come in. People, this is relating for people. Ron, thank you. Yeah, I restate deliverables, have the owner acknowledge and say, you know, what other questions do you have? What else do you need in order to do this? That's excellent suggestion. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So what I find when I work with people, either in a classroom or coaching, is I think it's really important to first acknowledge, you know, what the impact's been and give some context, right? And position your feedback in a way that prepares the other party to be open, right? Because feedback, we know from research, it's akin to somebody sneaking up on you in a dark alley, right? It is actually scary. We have a neural reaction to it. So here's an example. So it might be, you know, Raina, it's really important to me that we have and maintain a strong working relationship. And so in that spirit, I need to provide a little bit of feedback for you, and just be really open and honest. And, you know, I wanted to chat about the fact that I had asked you for that web traffic report because I needed it to get my work done. It was late and it impacted me, and here's how.
Yeah. And I think it's important too, like there's a comment in the chat panel, someone's not agreeing with the use of the word my in this. And I think it's, you know, it's tricky to wordsmith, but I think if you put some thought into it, it's important to just understand what's the bottom line of the other person's intent. We may not always use the exact right words, but to the best of your ability, not to trigger defensiveness, because we can overthink it and then end up just not having the conversation, right? So,
yeah. A key question word to avoid, especially in these conversations, is why. Why didn't you get the report to me? Why immediately invite somebody to feel defensive and feel they have to give you, like, defend, argue their point, the why, versus, you know, what got in your way is a much different question. You still are being clear, but you're being kind about it. You're not escalating emotion. Step 2 is all around that emotion piece, right? Managing your, I love all the little faces here and so on, but getting clear on your desired outcomes and managing your emotions is really, really critical. So there's a few ways that you can do this. So let's pull these up. The first one, and you might think this is fluffy. Okay, it's not. Okay, it works with the most assertive people, right? The most open to this kind of thing. Breathing is something that is typically a symptom of when we're in stress or in emotion. Our breathing usually becomes much more shallow. I joke sometimes that I forget to breathe when I'm in stress or high emotion. So taking slow, intentional deep breaths is magic. Sometimes you only need 1. 4, 7, 8 is my trick. So 4, inhale 4, hold and count for 7 counts, gets oxygen to that brain, and breathe out on 8. Okay, just a little trick. You can also take a quick walk. I'm on the 2nd floor in my house, so sometimes I just run down the stairs all the way to the basement, get myself a bubbly water or something like that, and run all the way back up, and it oxygenates the brain. I can't speak today. You can also first identify any negative emotions. Like, what is the story I'm telling myself? That Raina just doesn't care. She's got a poor work ethic. She's just mailing it in. Maybe I'm assuming that. What might actually be real, right? Ask what's an alternative to the story I'm telling myself. Very, very powerful, right?
Very hard to see sometimes, right? Because we're convinced that our version of the story is actually fact.
And it's not. We only ever have half the story, right? You have half the story, I have half the story. But you know, what's really going on, the full story is somewhere in between us. So we're trying to lean in and sort of see what's going on over there and be able to move forward, right? Ultimately, we want to move forward, not be stuck in an impasse in the current situation. So these are really some really critical steps. Who else has some other tips that they use? Somebody uses the Fitbit 2-minute deep breaths. Ooh, that's a good one. Count to 5. I use a journal. I actually write down. I just dump it all down. What's bugging me right now? What's what's making me feel angry? And then I think about how can I reframe? So I actually use a different color pen and I do that.
You're not alone. I see some comments around journaling, walk away, come back, mindfulness, the
24-hour rule. I assume that means you go, okay, I'm going to chill. I need to give myself a good sleep and then come at this. It's so funny how the emotion calms down when you give yourself space. So that's a great example. So, all right, let's keep going. So all of this is going to help you create safety, and virtually, creating virtual safety is even harder, right? It's enough to be trying to navigate this in the physical world, and now we've got to deal with that lack of body language and not being able to see people necessarily, that proximity bias, and so on. So let's look at some tips for this. So in terms of creating safety, because safety is around preparing the person to be open to what you have to say, right? So that they'll accept the feedback, even if they don't love it. They probably won't if it's difficult. You want them to be able to accept it, to be able to move forward though. So it's critical you choose the right vehicle, right? A lot of people, I know I've been guilty of this, just default to email, right? It's just easier to think through my thoughts there and sort of say what needs to happen. Email, a lot of people text, direct message, and so on. And those have their purpose for sure. With critical conversations, usually face-to-face or by telephone is much better, right? With some prepared questions, be intentional, be ready. So that's one. Choose the right vehicle. What's another one here? Ensure you have a good internet connection. Yep. Hardwired in if you can, right? You don't want it all of a sudden to be going in and out. Just adds to the stress, right? Optimize your lighting. I have special lights on today for all of you beautiful people. At minimum though, if I'm in a regular meeting, I don't necessarily have the brighter lights on, but people can see fully, so they can really, they're not getting half the expression and making assumptions about what I mean. Another one is be aware of camera angles and distance so that you're not sort of half hidden. And we talked about this earlier, try to schedule with privacy and distractions in mind. Involve the other person, right? To try to find the optimum time, knowing that we all have stuff going on at home in our virtual environments. All right, so tone. Oh, thanks, Lydia. Drink a tall glass of water. Yeah, be mindful of your tone. I actually set intentions before every single meeting, whether I'm teaching or I'm with a coaching client. I say, I will be present. I always start with that, in the moment. And I will be whatever else I think I need. Gentle, steady, calm, focused. These are really important, okay? So step number 4, listen to learn. So maybe put a yes in the comments. Have you ever realized you've been in a conversation with somebody and all of a sudden you realize you're just composing your answer? Yeah, right? Like we all do it, right? You're
people are saying yes.
Oh, yeah. See, we relate to it and it's hard to stop.
Yeah.
So I invite you to not beat yourself up if you notice yourself doing that. Use that awareness though, start to learn how to notice it so you can step back and decide, I'm going to listen to learn. I'm going to listen to understand. All right. This is really, really important. So we need to bring curiosity to the table, right? So the other thing I want to mention too is that this takes practice, right? Because I will tell you, for the first many years in my career, I didn't actually understand this concept, right? It was once I got into customer service and so on and really, had to deal with escalated customer concerns that I learned the value of being curious. Just decide, maybe I don't know. I'm going to be open to not knowing what the issue really is here. And it completely changes the questions you ask, the tone you use, and it creates better outcomes. So practice it. Now, in a virtual environment, there's additional layers of complexity here, some of which we've talked about. So let's look at what are some of these tips. The first one is really around maintaining eye contact. So avoiding, just the other day I had a coaching client who's spending good money out of their own pocket, and they hadn't turned their phone off. So they had notifications coming, they were feeling very pulled to it, right? And stuff coming up on their other monitor. So I actually invited them, if you really want to get the most of it out of our time together, I invite you to put, turn your phone off or, notifications for now, and what do you need to be really present? So eye contact, really, really key, encouraging people to do that. Physically lean in. So you'll notice I do a lot of that. Yes, granted, I speak for a living and I'm extroverted. It does help though, in terms of communicating to that person that they're important, right? That you're really like, it's all about you, versus sort of, doing other things and sort of being on the side. Another one is asking those clarifying questions. So I don't know if any of you follow Michael Bungay-Stainer on LinkedIn and so on. He's an incredible coach. And he had something up, I think it was last week, about an excellent question, right? Which is when somebody says, well, this is my challenge and this is my challenge, and there's a whole bunch of cards on the table. A great question to ask is, okay, so I'm hearing what you're saying. There's a lot going on. What's the real challenge? Like the main one for you right now? Right? Michael Bungay-Stainer or Stainier.
Yeah. Just looking up. I know he's
incredible. So he founded Box of Crayons, and I'm just got a new company and I just can't think of the name.
I'll type it in the chat. Just looking up the proper. There it is.
Yeah. And if you're interested in the power of questions, because it completely changes your game, leadership, connection, communication. Another great book is Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Mary Lee Williamson. All right. Paraphrase is the next one that is really key. Be careful not to paraphrase too much, because people think you're just kind of parroting, but it's okay to say, you might ask a question. So what got in the way here? I just want to understand. And then you might say, so what are some ideas about, how could I help you be able to get that report to me on time? Like, what do you need from me that would help you plan accordingly? Right? Is there something else I could be doing? Don't take the monkey on your shoulder, but those are some questions. And then paraphrase, perhaps Raina says, well, I just feel like I've got so much coming at me right now, and my boss wants me over here and do this. So I might say, okay, so I'm hearing, yeah, you're really juggling a lot of things. So what do you think, would be helpful for you to put in place to help you juggle those things? Versus saying, well, you should go talk to your boss and get her to fix that. Ask her. Trust that this person is an adult, a thinking adult, and you're just facilitating their ability to come up with their own solutions.
And I think that's a really good point, because I think sometimes as leaders, we feel like in order to be credible, we need to have the answers, right? We're supposed to be the wise ones, but really there's a lot more power in seeing the other person is capable of coming up with their own answers, and just to your point, asking the right question in the first place.
Yeah. So it's interesting, this need that we have to be right, or have the answers, have the solutions. And the biggest shift, the most transformational thing you can do as a leader, I think, as a human, is to realize you don't have to be right all the time. You don't have to have all the answers. You're actually not alone. It's actually, you are enough, right? You have enough. So the fifth step is agree on a path forward. Okay. Now, the reason we bring this one up is, the listening, the questions are so critical, but oftentimes we get through, we navigate the emotional stuff, right? And sort of the crux of the matter. And then we forget to decide, how are we going to move forward here? So that's why we've included this here. So let's break that down a little bit, right? Let's make sure we've got some discussion in around, how will you move forward from here? I've modeled some of that already for you. What's the next step? Let's agree on who's going to do what by when. And find out, what else do you need? Like in terms of time, resources, skill, like explore those things with them. Don't assume that they know, help them think through it. And you might want to include, hey, so if this kind of thing happens again, right, there's some other sort of misunderstanding, or something doesn't quite pan out the way we'd hoped, how do you want to discuss that? What would be the best way to approach it together?
I think this piece, that last point, is huge, because it can take a lot of nerve to address an issue. But if it comes up again, and a lot of times it will, if you've had that person's agreement, and then it gives it so much easier to go back and like, hey, remember we talked about if this were to come up again, you'd really want me to be open, or however it is that it comes up. It's just going to make it so much easier to go back and say, hey, we had an agreement about this is how we wanted to handle these things. So here I am, I've got something to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. And your partner's in this, right? Your partner's in this. Okay. All right. So much to cover in such a short time, but let's look at overall what these 5 steps were. Okay. Clarify your intent. That's the key thing. Clarify it for yourself, what you want for yourself, what you want for them, and say it. You know, my intention is that we both walk away from this feeling like we have what we need and we're able to get done what we need to do. Manage those emotions, do what you need, right? To know what your triggers are and how can you self-manage, right? That's a core sign of emotional intelligence. Be intentional, prepared around creating virtual safety in general, but virtually. Listen to learn, right? If you notice yourself listening to reply, that's okay. You're human. Welcome. So step back and shift. How can I listen? Like, what can I learn here? And finally, agree on a path forward. So 5 key steps that I get can be difficult to implement all at once. So I invite you to pick one. Where's your biggest opportunity, right? Maybe jot that down. What's the one area you really want to focus on trying to enhance, right? Build up the muscle. And I wish you great success with that. So I'll hand it back over to Tanya now.
Thank you. Yes, we're going to go into some Q&A, but I see some people are actually sharing what their number one or the biggest opportunity. Some folks are saying learn to listen, for example, or step number 5, agree on a path forward. That's often one for me. You know, I'm so relieved to just have had the conversation. I forget to actually wrap up at the end as to like, who's going to do what by when and how will we know it's done and all of that kind of stuff. We do have a couple of questions. If you haven't asked your question, remember to use the Q&A panel. One of the questions that came up was, first of all, if you could repeat the title of the book. Do you remember the title of the book that you had shared, Lisa?
Change Your Questions, Change Your Life.
Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. There you have it.
I don't want to go digging for it on my bookshelf. It's Mary Lee. I think it's Williamson. It's going through my head. I hope it's not Adamson. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I know the book and I don't remember the author. Yes, Mary Lee Adams is coming up.
Adams, there you go. So I was off a little bit.
Williamson, I think of Marianne Williamson. Okay. There was also a question is, how would you distinguish between active listening and paraphrasing or mirroring? Are they the same thing?
I think active listening is a broader umbrella.
Right. Paraphrasing is like a piece of it.
Yeah. So active listening is really, you know, it's that listening to understand and to notice, like, because there's things that, you know, even silence is communicating something, right? And tone. So active listening is dialing into all of those things, right? Because, you know, an example I use a lot in training classes around communication, leadership, and so on, it might be, Tanya, I love the earrings you're wearing today. Or, Tanya, I love the earrings you're wearing today. Right? I didn't change it.
Make me feel so good.
No, I didn't change a word, but I completely changed the impact and the meaning. So active listening is noticing, right? Or if you say to somebody, you know, a lot of leaders default to asking yes, no questions. You know, is that clear? Are you okay with that? Well, people are going to take the easy way out, right? Because it's uncomfortable. So they'll just say, yeah, I'm good. But if they say, yeah, I'm good. Well, what are you picking up? There's something telling you that, no, they're not so good. They're saying they are, but, right? So active listening is picking up on that. So you might say, well, you say you're good. That's paraphrasing. That's what I heard. And I'm noticing, though, maybe I'm wrong. That's fine if I am. But what I'm noticing, what I'm perceiving is that you're not so good with it. And then just zip it and allow them space to respond.
Yeah, that's really good. Rebecca has a question about any training related to this. Hang on, Rebecca. We got that coming up on the next slide. Thank you. There is another question. So how can we make sure a leader's accommodating / nice nature is not abused by always assuming something is going on instead of not really working? So I think that is more about how, you know, slipping into not holding somebody accountable. So I think we need to distinguish between giving someone the benefit of the doubt that there is other factors versus not holding someone accountable. So maybe Lisa, you can share a little bit more about that.
Well, I would say that, you know, 80% of leadership errors are made in the category of not being clear, not being open when something's not working, right? It's people actually, it's easier for us to be nice. If that wasn't a word that was used in that question.
Yeah.
It's easier for us just to be nice and not notice stuff or not call somebody on something, right? Because we don't want to create conflict. We avoid it in most cases, right? So something that's been really, really helpful for myself and thousands of others is the work of Brene Brown. If you haven't heard about her, it's time. Brene Brown. So she talks about a concept, and it's in her Dare to Lead book, one of her most recent books. She's taking her research and bringing it to leadership. She talks about this concept of being clear and kind. But for you to understand, I'm going to flip it. Unclear is unkind. So think about a time when somebody didn't really tell you that there was something going on that was creating issues around people's perception of your performance, for instance, and you didn't know about it until it was too late to correct it, perhaps. That's unkind, right? Or you walked around with spinach on your teeth all day and nobody told you, and then you're sort of like, well, I feel silly, right? Geez, nobody told me. That's embarrassing. So that's kind of a silly way to illustrate it. Clear and kind are possible. It's not clear or kind. It's both, right? How would it sound with your words if you were to be kind, consider how you want this person to feel, right? And be clear in terms of what you need them to know. I was impacted when you didn't get that report to me.
Yeah, and I think you can be compassionate. So, for example, I have a young daughter who's only in school physically 2 days a week. So the other 3 days she's here, and I'm trying to do my job. So if I drop the ball on something, and Lisa, you came to me and said, you dropped the ball, Tanya, and I came back with you and said, well, I'm managing my daughter, and I've got this, and I've got that. I think there's a fear that we're letting people off the hook. You can still be compassionate and say, I fully appreciate all of that. So let's talk about it. I'd love to hear from you. What are some strategies that you may have to better balance this? Or how can we build in some flexibility to work around your daughter's schedule? So you can still hold people accountable, but you don't have to be mean about it or, not be considerate of what they have going on. So I'm not sure if that's kind of answering the question as well.
Yeah, just a quick add on that, just to build on that, because that's a great example, is using I statements. I was impacted when I didn't get that report. Here's why: because I'm required to get this, on time. And then I had to deal with sort of a bit of conflict with my own boss because it wasn't in, right? So this is why, it's difficult to have this conversation, but I really, I'm hoping that we can figure this out, right? Like we can figure this out switching from I statements, here's the impact on me, to we're in this together. You're not taking it on for them. You are helping them think through it though, because you're both invested.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things in this COVID environment, just globally in general, whether it's creating a vaccine or solving individual problems, there's been a lot of coming together, a recognition that we can create so much more together. So have it be an inclusive we thing. I love that. I just want to be mindful of the time here. And we do have a bunch of additional questions. We won't be able to get to all of them. I do appreciate the humor though. People are talking about my earrings. I think one was saying the difference between, so tell me about those earrings, or what's up with those earrings? There's a distinction. That's really good. I love the sense of humor. I do want to share, like, if you're enjoying this conversation, if you're getting value, obviously Lisa and I can only go so deep in 60 minutes. So do know that here is a sampling of some of the programs that we have. We have things such as Mastering the Art of Critical Conversation. That is a deep dive. That's a great course. It's a 2-day program. We are doing them virtually right now, obviously, and they're a lot more, even more interactive than what you're experiencing today. We've got breakout groups. You can work in teams, make new friends, really start to try on and practice the skills. We've also got the conflict management workshop. Leading virtual teams isn't as specific on this topic of critical conversations, but it does cover sort of how we adapt to this virtual environment. And of course, I want to mention that we also have other webinars coming up. The next one that we're going to be talking about is all about getting productive. So strategies to rebuild clarity and focus. And this may be helpful, not just for you, but if you're having to have critical conversations with someone else that you feel is struggling right now with being productive, with being focused, this might be great for you in terms of coaching them, or something that you could suggest for them to attend. So that's coming up on February 23rd. Please visit cmcoutperform.com/upcoming events to see that. And then we also have some additional free resources. So be sure to check that out if you have not already. So with that, I want to actually thank Lisa. Thank you, Lisa. I think you're setting the intention of being present with us today. Definitely worked. I really felt your presence. You were really able to give us some really valuable insights. So thank you so much for that. This has been fun. I want to thank all of you listening. Thank you for participating with us. The chat panel's been going crazy. So I know you're here. I know you're present, and I know you're not distracted because I see all the comments. So there's lots of thanks here being extended to Lisa. We're really happy that you found this session valuable. So we hope to see you again on a future webcast. Until then, stay safe, stay well, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.